The classroom buzzed with the usual morning energy as cadets from a dozen different species filed into their seats. Taman slipped in quietly, choosing his familiar spot in the back corner where the light didn't quite reach. He preferred it that way. Being invisible had become his specialty over the past 2 years at the Galactic Military Academy. Hyunwoo waved at him from 3 rows ahead, his reptilian features breaking into what passed for a smile among the Zantari people. Taman nodded back, a small gesture that seemed to satisfy his roommate. Hyunwoo meant well, always trying to include him in study groups and weekend activities. But Taman found it easier to keep his distance. Easier for everyone, really. The massive screens at the front of the classroom flickered to life as Instructor Valesh entered. The Kralix warrior moved with the confident stride of someone who had seen real combat. His forearms carried data tablets and what looked like old physical storage drives, the kind used for classified military footage. The room quieted immediately. Valesh commanded that kind of respect without saying a word. "Today we study history," Valesh announced, his voice carrying the slight growl that all Kralix possessed. Not the sanitized version you find in textbooks. Real history, bloody history, the kind that changes wars. Taman felt something twist in his stomach. He focused on his desk, tracing an old scratch in the metal surface. 3 years ago, the border wars reached their peak. Valesh continued, connecting one of the old drives to the system. Colony after colony fell to enemy forces. Millions of refugees fled through hostile territory. And then came the Battle of Crimson Ridge. Several cadets leaned forward. Everyone had heard whispers about Crimson Ridge, but the full footage was classified military material. The fact that they were about to see it meant something significant. What you're about to witness has been analyzed by every major military academy in the galaxy, Valesh said. Tactical experts have spent thousands of hours trying to understand what happened. Combat AIs have attempted to recreate it. All have failed. The lights dimmed. The screen showed a helmet camera feed, grainy and damaged. Static flickered across the edges. A timestamp in the corner read 600 hours. The view showed a narrow canyon, red stone walls rising on either side. In the distance, smoke rose from what must have been the refugee evacuation site. A single soldier, Valesh narrated. Human, rank unknown. Identity unknown. Armed with standard-issue weapons and whatever could be scavenged. Held this position for 6 hours against an enemy battalion of approximately 800 soldiers. The footage jumped forward. Now the soldier was moving, weapon raised. The camera angle made it impossible to see the face clearly. Just glimpses of the lower half of the helmet. Enemy fire lit up the canyon. The soldier moved like water flowing from cover to cover. Each movement precise, no wasted energy. Taman's hands gripped the edge of his desk. His knuckles turned white. On screen, the soldier dropped behind a boulder, switched weapons with impossible speed, and took down 3 advancing enemies before they could react. The movement was smooth, practiced, but there was something else, something that made even the most experienced cadets in the room hold their breath. Note the tactical awareness. Valesh pointed at the screen. The soldier positions themselves to create crossfire angles with the terrain itself. Uses enemy movement patterns to predict positions before they're visible. This level of combat intuition is remarkable. The footage continued. Minutes became hours on the timestamp. The soldier never stopped moving, never stayed in one position long enough to be targeted effectively. Wounded at least twice that the camera caught, but never slowing down. The enemy forces kept coming, and the soldier kept stopping them. Around the classroom, cadets watched in awe. Jiwon, a decorated student from the warrior breed Kralix line, shook his head slowly. Impossible, he muttered. The physical stamina alone should have failed after the first hour. And yet, Valesh said, 6 hours, 400 enemy soldiers disabled or forced to retreat, 0 civilian casualties during the evacuation. By the time reinforcements arrived, the soldier had vanished. No trace, no identity records that matched. Just this footage. The video ended with the soldier limping toward the canyon's edge, disappearing into the smoke and dust. The last frame showed a gloved hand gripping a rifle, knuckles bloody through torn fabric. The lights came back on. Several cadets blinked, still processing what they had seen. Others immediately started arguing about the tactics, the techniques, the sheer impossibility of it all. Your assignment, Valesh announced, is to analyze this engagement. Write a tactical breakdown. Explain what you saw. Explain how it was possible. 2 and 3 days. As the class dispersed, excited chatter filled the hallways. Hyunwoo caught up with Taemin, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. Can you believe that? A human did that. Your species, Taemin. Doesn't that make you proud? Taemin managed a weak smile. Sure, pretty incredible. I mean, imagine if that soldier walked among us right now. Hyunwoo continued, gesturing wildly. They'd be a living legend. Every military in the galaxy would want them. Think of what they could teach us. Yeah, Taemin said quietly. Imagine that. They walked toward the dining facility together, Hyunwoo still talking excitedly about the footage. He analyzed the movements, the tactics, the split-second decisions. Taemin let the words wash over him, nodding at appropriate moments but not really listening. In his mind, he kept seeing that final frame. The bloody knuckles gripping the rifle. He knew those hands. He saw them every morning in the mirror, saw the thin scars that had never quite faded. Scars he told everyone came from a shuttle accident during his civilian transport days. That night, Taemin lay in his bunk while Hyunwoo snored softly across the room. The academy was quiet at this hour, just the hum of life support systems and the occasional footstep in the hallway. He stared at the ceiling, trying to push away the memories that always lurked at the edge of his consciousness. He didn't remember the battle. Not really. Medical experts called it traumatic dissociation, his mind's way of protecting itself from whatever had happened in that canyon. But sometimes in dreams he felt echoes, the weight of a weapon, the taste of dust and smoke, the sound of people screaming his name, begging him to hold just a little longer. His hands began to shake. Taemin clenched them into fists, forcing the tremor to stop. He had worked so hard to be normal, to be just another cadet learning how to serve. 2 years of blending in, of being forgettable, of convincing everyone, including himself, that he was just an ordinary human in an extraordinary academy. Tomorrow they would analyze the footage. Tomorrow his classmates would write essays about the mysterious soldier. Tomorrow everyone would wonder who that warrior was and where they had gone, and Taemin would sit in the back corner, invisible as always, carrying a secret that felt heavier with each passing day. The Advanced Combat Simulation Center occupied the entire 4th level of the Academy's training wing. Taemin had been inside only twice before, both times for basic squad exercises that lasted maybe 20 minutes. The center could recreate any battlefield condition, any terrain, any enemy force with frightening accuracy. Today, a crowd of cadets filled the observation deck overlooking the main simulation chamber. Word had spread fast. Instructor Valesh was running the Crimson Ridge scenario. This should be interesting, Hyunwoo said beside Taemin, pressing against the viewing window. I heard the AI uses every detail from the actual battle. Temperature, wind patterns, enemy behavior algorithms based on the real footage, everything. Taemin said nothing. He had tried to skip this demonstration, claiming he had medical appointments, extra study sessions, anything. But Hyunwoo had insisted, practically dragging him here. You need to see this, his roommate had said. It'll be educational. Educational, right. Below in the chamber, a Kralix cadet named Dairon stepped onto the platform. The simulation initialized around him, and suddenly the clean white room transformed into the red canyon from the footage. Rocky walls rose on all sides. The temperature display showed it climbing to match the desert heat. Wind picked up, carrying simulated dust. Begin, Valesh's voice echoed through the speakers. Darren lasted 8 minutes. He was skilled, using his natural Kralix strength and forearmed advantage to hold the initial position. But the enemy AI was relentless, learning from his patterns, adapting. Eventually, simulated fire overwhelmed him and the chamber went white again. Failure. 3 more cadets tried. A Zentari who lasted 11 minutes. A female cadet from the insectoid vril species who made it to 13 using clever defensive positions. Then Jiwan stepped forward and the observation deck went quiet. Jiwan was a legend himself, coming from a warrior bloodline that stretched back centuries. He moved through the simulation with practiced efficiency, his combat instincts sharp. 15 minutes, 20. The crowd started murmuring in amazement. At 23 minutes, the enemy AI adapted to his patterns and overwhelmed his position. Still, it was the longest anyone had survived. Impressive, Valesh commented. But the original soldier lasted 6 hours. 23 minutes, while commendable, shows us the vast gap between training and actual combat experience. Minseo went next. She was human. A squad leader with top marks in tactics. Taman watched her move through the simulation with growing tension. She was good, very good. Her decision-making was sound, her positioning smart. She lasted 17 minutes, second only to G1. Excellent work, Cadet Minseo, Valesh said. You showed strong fundamentals. But fundamentals aren't enough against these odds. Hyunwoo elbowed Taman gently. You should try. What? No, I'm not. Come on, Hyunwoo grinned. Just for fun. Everyone's trying it. Besides, you're human like the original soldier. Maybe your species has some genetic advantage we don't know about. Taman felt his heart racing. I don't think, but Hyunwoo was already calling out. Instructor Valesh. My roommate wants to try. Cadet Taman. Heads turned. Taman felt dozens of eyes on him. Valesh looked up at the observation deck, his expression unreadable. Cadet Taman. Come down, there was no refusing now, not without drawing more attention. Taman made his way down to the simulation chamber on shaking legs. The platform felt huge and empty. Valesh stood beside the control panel, studying him with an intensity that made Taman want to disappear. Have you reviewed the tactical footage as assigned? Valesh asked. Yes, sir. Good, then you understand what you're facing. This isn't about winning, Cadet. It's about learning. Survive as long as you can. Learn from your mistakes, Valesh paused. Begin when ready, the chamber transformed. Taman stood in the red canyon, the heat immediately pressing down on him. His hands found the simulated weapon automatically, muscle memory from basic training, except it felt different. The weight was familiar in a way that went beyond 2 years of academy drills. Enemy forces appeared in the distance. Taman moved to cover, his body flowing into position before his mind caught up. The first shots rang out. He returned fire. 3 quick bursts and 3 enemy simulations dropped. Clean hits. Center mass. In the observation deck, cadets started murmuring. Minutes passed. Taman moved through the canyon like he had been there before. He knew where the cover points were, knew the angles, knew how the enemy would approach. His conscious mind screamed questions, but his body just moved. Duck, roll, fire. Switch positions. Use the terrain. Create crossfire lanes with the rocks themselves. 10 minutes. 15. 20. The observation deck fell silent. Taman barely noticed. Something had taken over, something that lived beneath his normal thoughts. His breathing steadied even as the combat intensified. His hands stopped shaking. Everything became clear, simple, reduced to basic equations of movement and survival. The simulation threw everything at him. The enemy AI adapted, learned, tried new approaches. Taman countered each one, not through conscious thought, but through something deeper. Instinct, experience that shouldn't exist. 30 minutes. 40. Instructor, Valesh stood frozen at the control panel, his 4 hands hovering over the displays. On the screens, data streamed past. Movement patterns. Shot placement. Tactical decisions. Beside it, footage from the original Battle of Crimson Ridge played in comparison. The patterns matched. Exactly matched. In the simulation, Taman executed a weapon switch that analysts had called impossible without years of specialized training. He did it smoothly, naturally, like breathing. Enemy fire pinged off the rocks around him, but he was already moving. Already 3 steps ahead of where the AI expected him to be. 45 minutes. 47. Something in Taman's chest tightened. His vision started to tunnel. The simulation was too real, the sensations too familiar. Smoke in his lungs. Heat on his skin. The weight of people's lives pressing down on him. People he couldn't see but knew were there, depending on him to hold this line. His hands began to shake again. Stop, Taman said quietly. The simulation continued. Enemy forces advancing. Stop, he said louder, dropping the weapon. The canyon vanished. White walls returned. Taman stood in the center of the chamber, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. His legs felt weak. He looked up at the observation deck and saw every face pressed against the glass, staring at him in complete silence. Valesh walked slowly into the chamber. His expression was unreadable. He held a data tablet, and on it 2 videos played side by side. The original Crimson Ridge footage and the recording from Taman's simulation. The movements were identical. Frame for frame, perfect matches, Cadet Taman, Valesh said, his voice carrying through the chamber and into the observation deck. Remain where you are. Do not leave this facility. Hyunwoo pushed through the crowd to the front of the observation window, his face a mixture of shock and confusion. Around him, other cadets whispered urgently. Jiwon stared down at Taemin with an expression that might have been respect or might have been fear. Minseo's voice cut through the murmurs. That's him. That's the soldier from the footage. Taemin closed his eyes. 2 years of hiding, of being invisible, of trying to forget, all of it gone in 47 minutes. He had known this would happen eventually. Part of him had always known. You couldn't run from something that lived inside your own body, coded into your muscle memory, written into your reflexes. Someone contact Director Soman, Valesh said calmly. Immediately, the observation deck erupted into chaos. Questions shouted from every direction. Cadets arguing, instructors trying to restore order. Through it all, Taemin stood alone in the white chamber, surrounded by ghosts of a battle he couldn't remember fighting. Hyunwoo pressed his hand against the observation window, mouthing words Taemin couldn't hear through the glass. His roommate looked betrayed, confused, like everything he thought he knew had just been revealed as a lie. Taemin wanted to explain. Wanted to say he had never meant to deceive anyone, that he barely understood it himself. But the words stuck in his throat. How do you explain being two people at once? How do you tell your friends that the person they knew was real, but so was the warrior in the footage, and you didn't know how to reconcile those two halves? Valesh stood guard at the chamber entrance, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. His eyes stayed on Taemin, watching, evaluating. The old warrior had seen enough combat to recognize the look on Taemin's face. The distant stare, the trembling hands, the way someone looked when they were haunted by things they wished they could forget. Director Soman would arrive soon, and then Taemin would have to face the truth he had been running from for 3 years. The room fell silent. The cadet was the human from the battle footage, and nothing would ever be the same again. Director Soman arrived within 20 minutes. She was a tall human woman with gray hair pulled back in a military bun and eyes that had witnessed decades of warfare. The observation deck cleared quickly at her command, leaving only Instructor Valesh, a handful of senior staff, and the key witnesses. Hyunwoo refused to leave, planting himself firmly against the wall. Soman glanced at him, then nodded slightly, allowing him to stay. Taemin still stood in the simulation chamber. He had not moved from his spot, barely even breathing. Through the window, he watched Somin review the comparison footage on Valesh's tablet. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her posture told him she was not surprised. Not even a little bit. That was when Taemin understood. She had known all along. Somin pressed a button and her voice carried into the chamber through the speakers. Cadet Taemin, please come to the observation level. We need to talk. The walk-up felt like climbing toward his own execution. Every step heavy, every breath measured. When he entered the observation deck, the few people present stared at him like he was an exhibit in a museum. Something rare and dangerous and impossible to fully understand. Sit, Soman said, gesturing to a chair. Her voice was not unkind. Taemin sat. His hands found his knees, gripping tight to stop the shaking. I think, Soman began, addressing everyone in the room, that it's time for the full truth. Instructor Valesh, what you witnessed today was not an accident. Cadet Taemin is indeed the soldier from the Battle of Crimson Ridge footage. Hyunwoo made a sound like he had been punched. Jiwon, standing near the back, crossed his forearms and listened intently. Minseo's face showed anger, but she kept quiet. 3 years ago, Soman continued, Taemin was 19 years old. He was not military. He was a civilian contractor, doing basic technical work for the Colonial Logistics Division. When the enemy forces swept through the border territories, he was on Crimson Ridge Station, helping coordinate refugee evacuations. Taemin stared at the floor. He knew this story only from reports, from what others had told him. His own memory was a blank space filled with static. The military escort assigned to protect the evacuation was destroyed in the initial attack, Soman said. Thousands of civilians were trapped behind enemy lines. No reinforcements could arrive in time. The enemy battalion was already advancing through the canyon. By every tactical projection, everyone should have died. She pulled up footage on the main screen, not the combat footage everyone had seen, but before. Taemin saw himself younger, thinner, covered in dust and helping families onto transport shuttles. He looked terrified. This boy, Soman said, pointing at the screen, had basic firearms training from mandatory civilian defense courses. Nothing more. He had never seen real combat. But when that battalion entered the canyon, something happened. Valesh leaned forward. What happened? We don't fully know, Soman admitted. Taman experienced what military psychologists call an acute survival response. His mind and body entered a state beyond normal human function. Time perception altered, physical limiters removed. Combat instincts that should take years to develop appeared fully formed. That's impossible, Minseo said. You can't just suddenly know advanced tactics. You would think so, Soman replied. But the human brain under extreme stress can do remarkable things. Taman didn't learn those tactics in the traditional sense. His mind took every piece of information he had ever absorbed, every action sequence he had ever seen, every survival instinct encoded in human evolution, and synthesized it into pure reactive capability. Taman finally spoke, his voice rough. I don't remember any of it. Everyone looked at him. I've watched that footage 100 times, he continued. Studied every movement, every decision. That person in the video, that's not me. I could never do those things. But when I was in the simulation today, it happened again. Like my body knew what to do without asking my brain. And it terrifies me. Hyunwoo moved closer, his reptilian features showing confusion and hurt. Why didn't you tell me? We're roommates. I thought we were friends. We are friends, Taman said. But how do I explain this? How do I say that I'm two different people? The me that talks with you, studies with you, that person is real. But there's something else inside me. Something that wakes up when people are in danger, and I don't control it. The military tried to recruit him immediately after the battle, Somin continued. But Taman was catatonic for 4 months. Severe PTSD. When he finally recovered enough to function, he had no memory of the 6 hours he spent in that canyon. His mind had locked it away. So why is he here? Jiwon asked. Why put him in an academy if he's that damaged? Soman's expression hardened. He's not damaged. He's healing. Cadet Jiwon, I understand you come from a warrior culture, but humans process trauma differently. Taman came to this academy because he wanted to serve, wanted to understand what happened to him. I allowed it because I believed he deserved the chance to be normal. And you thought no one would notice? Minseo's voice carried an edge of anger. You let us struggle through training while someone who could do all of this was pretending to be average? Do you know how condescending that is? I wasn't pretending, Taman said quietly. I am average. That thing I did today in the simulation, that's not me. That's some survival mechanism I can't control. The rest of the time, I'm just another cadet trying to learn, same as you. Valesh had been silent through all of this, studying Taman with his predator's eyes. Now he spoke. I've seen soldiers with battle trauma before. Many times. But I've never seen someone split themselves so completely. When you were in that simulation, Cadet, your eyes changed. You were somewhere else. I was at Crimson Ridge, Taman whispered. For the first time since it happened, I started to remember. Not details, but feelings. The weight of knowing people were counting on me. The sounds of families crying. The knowledge that if I stopped, if I fell, they would all die. That's what pushed me through those 6 hours. The room fell quiet. Outside the observation deck windows, the academy grounds stretched out, peaceful and safe. It was hard to imagine real war existed out there. Real battles where people like Taman had to become something more than human just to survive. What happens now? Hyunwoo asked. Before Soman could answer, an alarm blared through the facility. Red emergency lights activated. A voice came over the academy-wide communication system. All senior staff report to operations immediately. This is not a drill. Colonial forces under attack at Hanil Station. Enemy force estimated at battalion strength. All combat-ready cadets prepare for immediate deployment. The observation deck erupted into motion. Instructors running for the door. Cadets checking their communication devices for orders. Jiwon and Minseo exchanged glances and headed for the exit without a word. Soman stood, her military bearing reasserting itself. Valesh, coordinate the deployment. Get the senior class combat teams organized. I'll contact Fleet Command for support vessels. What about him? Valesh nodded toward Taman. Soman looked at Taman for a long moment. Cadet Taman is exempt from combat operations due to his psychological profile. He will remain on academy grounds. But, Taman started. That's an order, Soman said firmly. I won't send you into another situation that might break you further. You've done enough. She left quickly, followed by most of the staff. Within minutes, only Hyunwoo and Taman remained in the observation deck. Through the windows, they could see cadets rushing toward the deployment bays. checking weapons, pulling on combat gear. Hyunwoo stood awkwardly, one hand reaching out but not quite touching Taemin's shoulder. I have to go. They're calling all second-year combat teams. I know. Listen, I don't fully understand what just happened, but you're still my friend, okay? The guy who helps me with tactical theory homework. The guy who never complains when I snore. That person is real to me. Taemin managed a weak smile. Thanks, Hyunwoo. Be careful out there. I will. Hyunwoo hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're the person from that footage. Means my friend is kind of a legend. Then he was gone, running to join his deployment team. Taemin stood alone in the observation deck. Below, the simulation chamber sat empty and white. He looked down at his hands. The same hands from the footage. The same hands that had held a defensive position for 6 hours against impossible odds. They looked so ordinary now, just hands. But he could still feel it lurking beneath his conscious thoughts, that other version of himself. The one that woke up when people needed saving. The one that didn't stop, didn't quit, didn't fall no matter the cost. Hanul Station would need that person. Those cadets deploying right now, including Hyunwoo, they might need what Taemin could become. But Director Soman had ordered him to stay. And maybe she was right. Maybe he had already paid enough. The academy felt like a ghost station after the deployment. Most of the combat-ready cadets had shipped out within 3 hours of the emergency call. Taemin walked the empty corridors, his footsteps echoing off metal walls. Each step took him closer to the transport bay. Each step was another chance to turn back. He shouldn't be doing this. Director Soman had been clear. Stay on academy grounds. Rest. Let the trained cadets handle the combat. He was exempt, protected by his psychological profile and the understanding that another traumatic event might shatter what remained of his fractured mind. But Taemin kept walking. The transport bay was mostly empty when he arrived. A few maintenance crews worked on equipment. Security was minimal. Everyone focused on the deployment operations. Taemin had studied the academy systems for 2 years. He knew the gaps, knew the timing, knew exactly how to slip aboard a supply transport heading to Hanul Station without being noticed. The cargo hold was cold and cramped. Taemin wedged himself between supply crates marked with medical symbols. The transport would take 3 days to reach Hanul Station, following the main fleet at a slower pace. 3 days to think about what he was doing. 3 days to turn back. He didn't turn back. The transport shuddered as it broke atmosphere. Through a small viewport between the crates, Taemin watched the academy shrink below. He thought about Soman finding out he had disobeyed orders. Thought about Hyunwoo's face when he discovered Taemin had followed them to a war zone. Thought about whether he was making the biggest mistake of his life or finally doing something right. I'm not going to fight, he whispered to himself in the darkness. Just coordinate from the rear. Use my tactical knowledge. Help them survive without becoming that person again. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a plan. It sounded like a lie. The 3 days passed slowly. Taemin survived on water rations and emergency meal packs from the supply crates. At night, or what passed for night in space, he dreamed about the canyon. Red walls closing in. The taste of dust. Sounds of weapons fire that never stopped. He woke up sweating, his hand shaking, and reminded himself why he was doing this. Hyunwoo was out there. Minseo, Ji-won, dozens of cadets he had studied alongside for 2 years. They were flying toward a battle they might not survive. And Taemin had knowledge, experience buried somewhere in his muscle memory that could help them. He didn't need to fight. He just needed to teach them how to survive. When the transport finally docked at the forward deployment station near Hanul, Taemin slipped out during the cargo unloading. Maintenance crews barely glanced at him. One more person in military-adjacent clothing wasn't unusual during a combat deployment. He kept his head down and made his way to the cadet assembly area. Taemin? The voice was shocked, almost angry. Minseo stood near a tactical display, still in her deployment gear. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be on academy grounds. I know, Taemin said, but I can help. Not fighting, he added quickly. Tactical coordination, teaching. I know things about combat that might keep people alive. Before Minseo could respond, Hyunwoo appeared from a side corridor. His reptilian features showed pure relief. Taemin, I can't believe you came. Did Soman change your mind about deploying you? Not exactly, Taemin admitted. You stowed away, Minseo said flatly. You disobeyed direct orders from the academy director. Yes, good, she said, surprising him. We need every advantage we can get. The situation at Hunniel Station is worse than the initial reports. Come on, Valesh is coordinating in the command center. The command center was organized chaos. Multiple screens showed different views of Hunniel Station, a sprawling colony built into a series of canyon walls. It looked disturbingly similar to Crimson Ridge. Taman felt his chest tighten. Instructor Valesh looked up as they entered. His forearms froze for a moment when he saw Taman. Cadet, you are supposed to be on Academy grounds. I know, sir. But I'm here, and I want to help. Valesh stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Fine, you'll work tactical analysis. No combat deployment. Understood? Understood, sir. The briefing started immediately. Hunniel Station housed 30,000 civilians. The enemy had landed a battalion-sized force, approximately 2,000 soldiers, and were advancing through the canyons toward the evacuation sites. 3 large transport ships could evacuate 8,000 people each, but loading took time. Time the defenders didn't have. We have 200 cadet-level soldiers, Valesh explained, most with minimal combat experience. Against a force 10 times our size, holding traditional defensive lines is suicide. We need to delay them long enough for evacuation, then fall back to the transports ourselves. Taman studied the tactical displays, the geography, the enemy approach vectors, the defensive possibilities. Something clicked in his mind. Not memory exactly, but understanding. He saw the pattern, saw what needed to happen. The choke points, he said quietly. Everyone looked at him. The canyons narrow in 3 places. Taman continued, pointing at the display. If we hold these positions, we force them to funnel through. Makes their numbers less relevant. They can't use their full force if they can't spread out. Valesh nodded slowly. Sound tactics. But holding those positions against sustained assault requires experienced soldiers. We don't have those. I can teach them, Taman said. Not how to be heroes, just how to survive. Efficient movement. Using terrain. Making every shot count. I spent the last 3 days thinking about this. I know what needs to be taught. Over the next hours, Taman worked with the cadet groups. He showed them the techniques from the simulation, broken down into simple steps. How to move between cover points without wasting energy. How to create crossfire angles using the terrain itself. How to read enemy movement patterns and predict their next position. Jiwan watched him demonstrate a weapon switch technique. You do that like breathing. How long did it take you to learn that? I don't remember learning it, Taman said honestly, but I can show you the movement slowly. Practice it 50 times. It'll feel more natural. They trained through the remaining deployment time. Taman moved between groups, correcting stances, suggesting alternatives, sharing pieces of knowledge he didn't remember acquiring. Part of him waited for that other consciousness to wake up, for the survival mechanism to take over, but it didn't. He remained himself. Just a cadet teaching other cadets how to stay alive. That night, the core group sat together in a break room. Hyunwoo, Minseo, Jiwon, and Taman. They ate ration meals and tried not to think about the battle coming in a few hours. I'm terrified, Hyunwoo admitted suddenly. I keep thinking I'll freeze when it matters. That all my training will just vanish and I'll get someone killed. I joined the academy to prove myself, Minseo said. To show my family I could be something other than what they planned for me. But now I just want everyone to survive. Even if I fail at everything else, I want to bring these people home. Jiwon's voice was quieter than usual. My people value courage above all. But I'm learning that being afraid and fighting anyway might be the real courage. The footage we saw, the soldier at Crimson Ridge, I used to think they must have been fearless. Now I wonder if they were just terrified and did it anyway. They all looked at Taman. I was terrified, he said. That's the one thing I remember feeling. Not invincible or heroic, just absolutely terrified that I would fail and everyone would die. But there were people behind me counting on me to hold, so I held. Are you afraid now? Hyunwoo asked. Taman thought about it. Yes, but not of the battle. I'm afraid of what I might become if things go wrong. I'm afraid I won't be able to stop it this time. That the person who fights that survival mechanism might not let me come back. Then don't let it take over, Minseo said firmly. You taught us to survive. We'll hold those lines together. You don't have to become that other person. Just be our friend who happens to know tactics. It sounded simple. It sounded possible. But Taman had felt the weight of Crimson Ridge. He knew how plans fell apart when people started dying. He knew that sometimes, no matter how hard you tried to stay yourself, Survival demanded you become something else. The alarm sounded. Enemy forces had begun their assault on Hanel Station. Evacuation transports were loading civilians. The cadets moved to their defensive positions. Taman took his place in the command center, monitoring tactical displays, ready to coordinate from the rear, ready to stay himself. But through the command center windows he could see the canyons. Redstone walls rising toward the sky, and his hands began to shake. The first hour went exactly as planned. G1 held the eastern choke point with his squad, using the terrain advantages Taman had taught them. Minseo coordinated evacuation flow, keeping civilians moving toward the transports in organized groups. Hyunwoo's team protected the evacuation zones and the defensive lines held steady. From the command center, Taman watched the tactical displays and felt cautiously hopeful. Then the enemy reinforcements arrived. "Sir," a communications officer called to Valesh. "New contacts. Enemy force doubled. Now reading 4,000 hostiles." The command center went silent. 4,000 against 200. The math was simple and brutal. Valesh's expression remained calm, but his forearms moved rapidly across the control panels. "All units, enemy reinforcements detected. Hold your positions. We still have 3 hours until the last evacuation transport is loaded." But Taman could see the tactical display. Could see how the enemy was adapting now that they understood the defensive strategy. They were splitting their forces, applying pressure to all 3 choke points simultaneously. The cadet defenders would be overwhelmed within the hour. "We need to fall back," Minseo's voice came through the communication system, strained but controlled. "We can't hold against these numbers." "Fall back where?" G1 responded. "If we leave these positions, they'll reach the evacuation zones. 20,000 civilians are still waiting to board the transports." Taman stared at the tactical display. The geography was almost identical to Crimson Ridge. The same type of canyon system. The same narrow paths forcing combat into close quarters. And there, highlighted in red on his screen, was the primary choke point. The one place where a single defender could hold the line while everyone else retreated. He had been here before. Not physically, but tactically. This exact scenario. The same impossible choice. "There's another option," Taman said quietly. Valesh looked at him. In that moment, the old warrior understood exactly what Taman was suggesting. "No, you're not going out there. Someone has to hold that main choke point. You know it, I know it. That's the same tactical situation as Crimson Ridge. The same solution." "You're not that soldier anymore," Valesh said. "You're a cadet who's healing from trauma. I won't send you into another situation that breaks you. I'm already broken, sir. Have been for 3 years. But I can still be useful. Those people out there, Hyunwoo, Minseo, G1, all of them, they're going to die if someone doesn't hold that line. And we both know I'm the only one who can do it." Through the command center windows, Taman could see the canyon. He could feel it calling to something inside him. That other consciousness, the survival mechanism, already stirring in response to danger. "If I don't go," Taman said, "then what was Crimson Ridge for? What were those 6 hours for? I became a monster to save people then. Those people mattered. These people matter. Director Soman wanted me to be normal, to heal, to be safe. I understand that. But normal people don't survive situations like this, and right now these people need someone who isn't normal." Valesh's 4 hands clenched into fists. He was a warrior. He understood duty and sacrifice. He also understood that he was about to send a traumatized young human to relive his worst nightmare. "If you do this," Valesh said slowly, "you might not come back. Not your body, your mind. The person you've been trying to be might not survive." "I know," Taman said. "But Hyunwoo will. Minseo will. Ji-won will. All those cadets who trusted me to teach them will live. That trade seems fair." He walked toward the equipment storage before anyone could stop him. Found standard combat gear, weapons, ammunition. His hands moved automatically, checking systems, testing weight distribution. Muscle memory that had been waiting 3 years to activate. At the command center exit, Hyunwoo appeared, blocking his path. His reptilian features showed desperation. "Don't, please, we'll find another way." "There isn't another way," Taman said gently. "You know there isn't, but listen to me, Hyunwoo. When this is over, when you're safe on that transport ship, I need you to remember something. The person you knew, the roommate who helped you with homework and listened to you talk about your family. That person was real. Don't let what I'm about to do erase that, okay? You're talking like you're dying. Part of me is. But that's fine. Parts of us die so other parts can live. That's what being human means sometimes. Taemin smiled, and it was sad and genuine. You're my best friend, Hyunwoo. Thank you for that. He moved past before Hyunwoo could respond, jogging toward the canyon system. Behind him, he heard Valesh on the communication system. All units, primary choke point is being reinforced. Fall back to secondary positions and continue evacuation. Maintain radio discipline. The canyon walls rose around Taemin as he reached the position. Redstone, just like in his dreams. The heat pressed down, making the air shimmer. In the distance, he could see enemy forces advancing, thousands of them moving like a dark tide through the canyon passages. Taemin checked his weapon one final time, took a deep breath, let his mind go quiet. I'm sorry, he whispered to himself, to the person he had been trying to be, to the future he would never have. But people need saving, and saving people is what I do. Then he let go, stopped fighting the other consciousness, let it rise up from wherever it had been sleeping. The world shifted around him. Time seemed to slow. Every detail became sharp and clear. He could see enemy movement patterns 3 steps ahead, could calculate trajectories before weapons fired, could feel the rhythm of the battle like music. The survival mechanism took over completely. What happened next would later be described in official reports as tactically impossible but empirically documented. The enemy force hit the choke point like a hammer. And Taemin held, not through superhuman strength or advanced weapons, through pure efficient combat. Every movement minimized, every shot counted, every decision calculated for maximum effect with minimum waste. He didn't fight with rage or fear. He fought with terrible purpose. Because behind him people were escaping. Every minute he held was another transport filled with civilians. Another cadet squad reaching safety. Another life saved. Minutes became hours. His body moved on autopilot, the conscious part of his mind distant and observing. He saw himself executing the same techniques from Crimson Ridge, but refined now. Better. As if the 3 years of healing had somehow sharpened the skill rather than dulled it. The enemy adapted, learned, tried different approaches. Taemin countered each one, used the terrain, created crossfire angles with the canyon walls themselves, became something more than human not through magic or technology, but through sheer will to protect what mattered. In the command center, Valesh watched the tactical display in silence. Beside him, other officers stared at the combat telemetry, not quite believing what they were seeing. One person holding against thousands, impossible, yet happening. Last transport ship is loaded, the communications officer reported. All civilians evacuated. Cadet forces are boarding the final military transport now. Order the cadet retreat to leave, Valesh said. Get them out of here. What about, I'll extract him myself. Valesh grabbed a weapon and moved fast for someone his age. He reached the canyon system just as the last cadet transport lifted off. The battle was chaos. Enemy forces everywhere, and in the center of it all, Taemin fought like a machine, precise and relentless. Cadet Taemin, Valesh shouted over the weapons fire. Evacuation complete. Fall back. But Taemin didn't respond. Couldn't respond. The survival mechanism was fully in control now, and it had one simple program. Hold the line. Protect the people. Don't stop until the threat is gone or you are. Valesh moved into the combat zone, his forearms working his weapon with practiced skill. He reached Taemin's position, grabbed his shoulder. Everyone's safe. You did it. Now let's go! For a moment, Taemin's eyes focused. Recognition flickered across his face. Then his legs buckled. The adrenaline that had kept him moving for hours suddenly ran out. Valesh caught him as he fell. I got you, the old warrior said. You're done. You held. They're all safe because of you. Half carrying, half dragging Taemin, Valesh made it back to his small attack shuttle. Enemy fire chased them all the way. The shuttle lifted off just as the enemy forces reached their position. Through the viewport, Taemin watched the canyon falling away below. The world felt strange. Too quiet. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Did they make it? He asked, his voice barely audible. Every single one, Valesh confirmed. All civilians evacuated. All cadet forces safe. 0 casualties among our defenders. Because you gave them time. Taemin closed his eyes, felt tears running down his face. He didn't know if they were from relief or grief or exhaustion. Maybe all 3. The survival mechanism was retreating now, leaving him feeling hollow and fragile. "I remember this time," he whispered. "I remember all of it. Every minute. Every choice. I don't want to remember." "I know," Valesh said. "But you will anyway. That's the price." 3 months later, Taman stood in front of a classroom at the academy, not as a cadet this time, as an instructor. Tactical theory and advanced combat methodology. The cadets watched him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Everyone knew his story now. The soldier from Crimson Ridge, the hero of Hunnell Station. But Taman didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had made a choice and paid the cost.